Hello, wonderful. This is Sarah, and I'm here with Taylor Irby. And I know you're going to be excited because when we met, I said, "What's your favorite thing to talk about?" And she said, "Oh," and her face lit up. And then she was like, "I love thinking about like the brain and how kids' brain develop and how kids' brains develop." That's kind of a tongue twister. Kids' brains develop and how the language we speak can affect their brains, their emotions, and their upbringing. So, Taylor, we are excited to talk to you today. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Sarah?
I'm great, and I love neuroplasticity and growth mindset and all the brain buzzwords. So,
Yes.
um, why don't you tell us a little bit about, in your words, what you said your favorite thing to talk about was?
Yeah, well, I have 5 children, and I have always tried to think, how can I parent them in a way where they feel safe and loved and connected to us? And so I have kind of taken the deep dive into how do kids' brains develop. And as an I was an education major, and so from that background, and then just working with my own children throughout the years, I love learning about these things that help us as parents really connect with our kids. When I learned about these things, like, it was just so life changing for me, and being able to kind of see these things and how they kind of play out in my own home, and having the way it changed my parenting with them. And so it was just really, really incredible. So I love talking about just the ways that we can parent differently, the way that we can speak to our children, and really just to any human being, because it's kind of across the board how people operate, just so that we can be more effective in our communication skills and sending the right messages we want to our children.
And we can remember that we have a choice, right? Like if we were talked to very harshly as kids,
Yes.
we can change. If we were talked to or ignored as kids, like we have the choice to show up differently for our kids. And I had someone and they said a really interesting quote, and they said, just be aware that however you raise your kids is probably how your grandkids are going to be raised. And I was like,
Mm,
oh man, that's
mm,
really powerful, right?
it's really powerful.
Because we hardly ever take it to the next level. It's like,
Mhm.
well, I don't want to be mad, my kids to be mad at me, or I don't want this, or I don't want that with my own kids. But then to like take it to the next level of like, oh, right?
Mhm.
How do
Yeah.
I want my grandkids to be raised?
Yeah, absolutely. And just but knowing that we have the choice and the power to break that cycle is really powerful. Like, you may
Mhm.
have been treated too harshly as a child, but you have the choice in this moment to say, I'm not going to treat my child that way. I'm going to go about it differently. Now, it's going to be super hard because that's the way right? And so that's what I do. I come in alongside discouraged parents, and I help them figure out a way that works for them and their own personality and with the personalities of their children, so that they can effectively communicate with their children through their own personality in their own way.
Mhm. So, what are some general communication strategies that you kind of see work
Yeah,
more across the board? I know it's never a one size one fits all when
sure.
it comes to kids and parents, but what are some things we should be keeping in the forefront of our own minds?
I think the absolute first question we have to ask ourselves when encountering any kind of conflict with any human being, but especially with children, our own children, is stopping and paying attention to what's going on inside our own selves, and asking the question, what's going on inside of me? What is it about this situation that might be triggering me? Am I just stressed out in general right now? Like, maybe something didn't go so well in my day, and then my child has kind of stepped on my toes, and now I'm flaring? Or is it that my child is doing something that's blocking a goal for me? Am I thinking, oh my gosh, my child's 5 and doing this right now? What is it going to be like when he's 15? Are these things that are
Oh,
kind
that's the one
of
I would do. That's the one I would be worried about. Yes.
Right, right. And so kind of like stopping first and saying, okay, I recognize, and it takes a lot of patience and being intentionally self-aware, like what is going on inside of us. Being able to stop and say, okay, so how can I get to a place of neutrality? For me, it's taking my dog on a walk around the block. It's a very short walk, but just getting out in fresh air away from, so my kids are a little bit older, so I can leave them at home for a few minutes, walking around the block with them with the dog for a little bit, having maybe one chocolate and a cup of tea, can help me kind of regulate. But just some things to help us be okay inside. I think another really, really key thing to remember is I can be okay even though my child is not. So whatever the outcome of my child, we don't have a lot of control of how they're going to turn out, right? They're going to turn out the way they're going to turn out. What I can do is I can say, I can be okay. My identity does not lie in the way my child performs. If I'm out in public and my child's having a meltdown, it is not a reflection of me as a mom. It's my child dealing with something that's going on. So then it frees me up from bringing myself into that, and it helps me be present with my child. So that's the very, very first thing, is asking what's going on with me. The second thing that I tell parents is, and that we teach through Connected Families, which is who trained me, is what's going on inside of my child. Like, I have a child with autism and developmental delays and adoption trauma. That's big triggering thing all day long, right? And so when he comes home and he's treating me with disrespect and he's asking for the same thing over and over again, and I'm giving it to him and he's saying, no, I want something else, I need to be remembering, okay, this child has just gone through a major transition from school to home. And so maybe this child really just needs my attention right now. Like, I need to put down the dinner preparation, put down my phone, and really just hold him for a minute and just talk to him. Right. And so I think those are like the big, the big two things I can think of off the bat that are just really, really huge with communication. What's going on inside of me, what's going on inside of my child, because then that really frees us up to enter in, to be able to coach them, to be able to get to know them as people, to be able to correct them in ways that help build their wisdom so that they can be equipped to make better choices in the future.
And I think teaching them to have their own breaks, when so that actually happened really recently in my house. So yesterday, my son was working through math and he was frustrated. And I said, he went to his room and left all his homework right beside me. And I said, hey, if you're finished with your homework, clean up your math book off the kitchen area. And he said, I'm not finished. I'm frustrated. So I'm going to take a little bit of a break and come back to it. And I was like,
Oh,
yes!
awesome.
I mean, it felt like I'd won the Super Bowl, and I was just like,
totally.
yeah. I didn't say anything to him at the time, but then this morning I was like, I'm really proud of you. That was really emotionally healthy, which I don't know if
Totally.
My son's kind of a nerd, like in the best way. He was like, calls himself that, so he's like down with that language. My daughter, I would have used a different language with her if she had done that, but but really affirming, like, hey, that was well done. You were frustrated, you took a break, you came back to it, you didn't give up, but you didn't shut down, you just took a little break, and but then as a parent too, I didn't say, hey, what are you doing? You just left all your homework here, right? It's not my job to clean it up. It's your job to clean it up, like trying to approach that. And I'm talking as if I'm the perfect parent. I'm not. I had a great snapshot last night.
None of us are. None of us are. We fail every day.
I had a good, strong snapshot last night, but how easily at other times, I'm sure, would it have been like, why did you leave your homework on the counter? Why? It's not my job to pick up after you. What are you doing here? But just the curiosity. Hey, you're finished.
Yeah. I love how you entered with that, Sarah. You were very lighthearted and fun, when you approached him, and that gave him the freedom to just be totally real with you and let you know what's going on. And the safety of saying, I feel frustrated, I need a break. Like, you kind of set that up, because if you would have come in with that big angry energy, that's when, of course, the amygdala in the back of the brain fires. I'm not safe. I'm being attacked. And then the front of the brain says, I can't think, right? And so then it's just big angry reaction. And so being able to, we use the term slow, low, listen. So just being able to be slow in your approach with him and getting down in his level and listening to what he has to say. You did wonderful with that. I also love what you said also about just affirming what was going well for him. We like to tell parents ABC affirmations. So the action, like, good job, right? And then the benefit, why is it beneficial to them? Like, you recognize what was going on inside of you and you were able to take a break. And then the character, wow, you're really growing in your emotional intelligence. one day when you're at work and you're working on a project and you feel like you're going to explode to your coworker, you've built up that emotional intelligence to be able to take that break. And so like, that's going to serve you well in your life. Right. And so being able to affirm those things and knowing like whatever we're going to focus our energy on, that's the fertilizer, that's what's going to grow. So being able to like affirm him the way that you did was absolutely beautiful.
Well, thank you. And I was in a real season. My husband has like a cold or something, and we were at a family, like an event, travel sport event all weekend. And so it was really interesting because Monday, I really cleared my calendar, right? It was like, whoa, I've been firing at all cylinders. And so Monday, I was set up for that conversation because I wasn't exhausted. Right.
Yeah.
I wasn't at my wit's end. I
Right.
had, balanced and managed a lot of things in my life. So that way, when it was time for that conversation, my brain had a lot of firing power left over.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I am not able to do that.
Right.
Sometimes I am not. And so I do want to preface it when we talk about self-care and not being overly tired, getting good sleep. To me, I think and I actually, because I had traveled, I think I went to bed at 8 p.m. last night. I went to bed really early last night. I had
Wow.
lots of stuff today on the calendar, and I was tired, so I went to bed. Right. But that's something in my own life and in my client's life. It's like, hey, you don't get to decide when those conversations happen that fight and flight could pop up.
Right.
You just need to assume that they are going to pop up, and you need to prep your level of exhaustion, your level of taking care of yourself, your level of not eating a bunch of junk. I'm the queen of eating junk sometimes, right. Yeah. But it is something I think about in my parenting style. I think about it a lot. It's like, how I don't know when the hard conversations and decisions are going to pop up. I just have to know that I don't want to be at the end of my rope
Right.
when they do pop up.
Yeah. You got to reserve some margin and some time for yourself. I think like it's really important to try to plan those things, but I think for a lot of times in my life, and then in probably a lot of your listeners' lives, is that they're thinking there is no margin. Like I'm thinking about a lot of single parents or parents with, a spouse who's terminally ill, or a child that's terminally ill. And just like, how do I get that? I think there's also seasons. I was speaking to a client last night, seasons of, it's just a crazy time right now. And I've got to give myself heaps and heaps of grace. I remember during the COVID pandemic, the beginning of the pandemic when it hit, and we lived in Bosnia. We were missionaries there for 11 years, and we left our home in 3 days because the country was shutting down, and one of our children has severe asthma. We had to get back to a specialist. And so we left our dog, we left all of our stuff, we left our home, and landed in this temporary housing in the States with 5 kids and all of us having big emotions. And I remember thinking, I'm going to let them watch a lot more TV than I normally let them watch. They're going to play a lot more video games than they normally play. This is not normal right now. And so I'm just going to give myself the time and the space, because them sitting at the TV for this longer amount of time than normal gives me the space to be able to take care of myself or to process or to take a deep breath, right? It doesn't give me the time to like veg out on social media all day long, which is what I want to do, but it's going to give me the time and space to be able to take care of myself.
I love that. And I love that example. Again, that's why I wanted to point out, like, okay, I've had a lot of grace and space that day.
Sure.
There are other times other seasons, if the same conversation had happened when I was in the final stages of editing my book, I may not have handled it so well. I was exhausted. I was at the end, and have that grace and space, and to recognize that none of us are perfect.
Absolutely. And to also recognize that, like, for a myriad of reasons, you could have grown up in the perfect home with the perfect parents, but you still have lies that you've believed about yourself or about your kids, right? Starting with yourself. Like, I might think I am a really angry mom, but like being able to reframe that and say, no, I'm an intense mom because I really love my kids. And so being able to reframe these lies that we believe about ourselves and turning them into truth, kind of flipping them on their backs, I think is super important.
Well, Let's chat about, because I know a lot of my listeners, if a parent had talked bad to them or there had been some type of verbal abuse in the past,
Mm.
and then sometimes kids can say things. The way I like to describe it is sometimes adults can act like angry teenagers or hormonal middle schoolers, but the hormonal middle schoolers, it's a whole lot more appropriate when they are testing out some of those things. The problem
Mhm.
is that maybe your 60-year-old father said the same thing to you last week, or you know
Right.
a former spouse or something along, or a boss, right? So
Right.
let's say that amygdala, we're not in the rest and digest stage, and that amygdala does get fired up. What and kids can say things to get us triggered, and we have to respond somehow. What should we do in those situations?
Ah, I would say go back to that question, what's going on inside of me? Really being paying attention and saying, okay, I can't take this personally. This child is not my father. This child is not my, you know, previous person who abused me that way. This child is expressing their frustration. But the hard thing is that we can't really think when we're in that fight or flight, right? When we're triggered, we're not going to be able to stop and say, okay, this child's not this person. But I think it's recognizing, like, I know exactly how my body feels when I'm in fight or flight. Like, I start to feel hot up here and I start to feel this energy inside, and so being able to know that I need to take a break and I should not speak right now because the words that are going to come out of my mouth right now are not going to be helpful. So sometimes I'll even say that to my child. I'll say, I'm feeling very angry right now. I know that when I speak to you, when I'm angry, it usually does not go well. And I usually end up saying something very hurtful. I don't want to be hurtful to you right now. So I'm going to go take a break and let myself calm down. I'll get back with you in a few minutes. Whatever
Mhm.
you can do to take that break and really assess, okay, what is it about what that person just said, what that kid just said to me that's triggering for me? And going back
Mhm.
and, saying, okay, my dad said that to me and it was hurtful. You know, whether or not it was intentional for him to hurt me that way, it really hurt and it left a mark on me. How can I go back and work through this area of this is not true, right? This is a lie. And so, like, how can I search and find the truth to combat that lie?
So that I completely agree. That's the first step.
Mm.
Where do you take it to the second step of not only maybe what's going on with that child, but then also at some point there has to be, or I don't say there has to be, uh, at some point it seems like the most logical ending is, hey, but we don't need to talk to people that way. That
Mhm.
was what you
Absolutely.
said was hurtful, right? So what
Absolutely.
do we say when we get to the language of that piece of it?
Yeah. So once again, connectedfamilies.org is who trained me. I have to keep giving them credit because all of this stuff is their material. We started with that question of what's going on inside of me, what's going on inside my child. And then the third piece, which is what's flowing up out of those two statements, is how can I coach my children with wisdom, right? And so, like, finding that gift that might have been gone awry. Okay. So I have a child that is very, very creative with her words. And she has a really high ability to be able to put down her sister in the most creative of ways, right? And it's very painful. And so being able to interact with her and calling out that gift of saying, once she's calmed down and once they're separated, of course, that's the first thing, is making sure that both kids are regulated and separated from each other. Being able to say, wow, you have a very talented gift for words. And I can see how one day, you're going to use those words for the world and it's going to be amazing. Right now, it's not very helpful. Let's talk to your sister and find out maybe how she's feeling about it. And then really trying to model listening, right? I think, like, when we listen to our kids, then they're going to learn eventually how to listen to others, right? And so being able to, like, say, okay, child number one, what were you feeling when you heard your sister say these words to you? And child would say the words and then ask this child, what did you hear? What did she say? And well, she said this, and this, that she felt these ways. And it was that, and then asking the other child, like, is that correct? Yes, Okay, then what were you feeling when you said those words? Like what led to that? And so being able for both of them to hear and to understand each other, I think is really important. And then say, okay, well, how can we make it right? So when it comes to like name calling or saying something, that's hurtful to another kid, um, it takes four statements of what we call kind and true to heal a wrong thing that was said. And so if I called you a poo-poo head, I need to go back and say four things that are kind and true. The first one being, no, you're not a poo-poo head, right? You're actually really smart and you're really kind to others. And I think I can learn a lot from you, and maybe drawing a picture for that other kid. So trying to make it right and reconcile so that we can get back on to our life together. I think it's really important to teach kids, as far as the sibling conflict goes, how to really be peacemakers with each other, because in the world, could you imagine if children learned how to be peacemakers early on and then kind of went out into the world as peacemakers? So in that case of just using what you said about you can't speak to others that way, I think that's a really great method to move forward with that.
I love that. And definitely something I need to incorporate in my own parenting more is the like bringing it to, man, that skill as an adult
Yeah.
is going to be this and this. You mentioned it twice, and I want to point out what you're saying and make sure all the listeners heard that, because I really like that, and it gets our kids future focused as well. So I'm also thinking about how that could play out in the motivation piece, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. What are you going to do when you grow up? That if there's some type of building blocks that you've already put in place, like I know you're able to use creative words, like that's a building block as they start to think about their own future. So I really liked that.
And if you think about it too, like how would you have felt as a child if when you misbehaved, your parent said, wow, I can see that you are really bump, 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 bump. Like it's not helpful right now, but matured and, practice, like it's really going to bring a gift to the world. How can we work together to solve this problem so that you can build that skill?
I love that. Taylor Irby, this has been great. Will you tell people where they can find out more about you?
Sure. Well, you can go on Facebook and look at Taylor Irby Coaching. And then same as on Instagram, Taylor Irby Coaching. I'm working on a website. If you're interested more in the Connected Families framework, you can go to connectedfamilies.org. I'm listed on there as one of their coaches, but I would love to work with you. I work with parents all around the world on Zoom. So yeah, thanks for listening today.
I love it. Taylor, thank you for helping us on our journey to becoming toxic person proof.
Thank you, Sarah.